Naruto ran through the dense forest, his breath sharp and ragged, his heart pounding like a war drum. The sting of fresh bruises and cuts burned against his skin, yet the pain paled in comparison to the hollow ache in his chest. The villagers had cornered him again, throwing stones, jeering, calling him a monster. He had managed to escape this time, but their words clung to him like poison, festering deep within his soul. The forest grew darker as he moved deeper, his feet carrying him far beyond where any sane person dared to tread. Rumors spoke of cursed lands and forbidden grounds, but Naruto no longer cared. If this place consumed him, it would at least end a torment. His steps faltered when he reached a clearing shrouded in shadows, dominated by a cracked stone monument that pulsed with an unnatural energy. An unseen force called to him, whispering in a voice both seductive and commanding. Despite the chill that crept down his spine, Naruto stepped closer, his hand brushing against the ancient surface. A sudden surge of power exploded from the monument, and the ground beneath him gave way. He plummeted into darkness, his scream echoing in the void. When he awoke, Naruto found himself lying on cold, damp stone. Strange markings glowed faintly along the walls of what appeared to be an underground chamber. At the center of the room stood an obsidian pedestal, upon which rested a crimson crystal pulsating with a sinister light. Compelled by a force he couldn't resist, Naruto approached the pedestal. The moment his fingers brushed the crystal, pain unlike anything he had ever experienced tore through his body. He collapsed to the ground, writhing as his veins burned and twisted. Images of blood and chaos flooded his mind, visions of creatures with fangs and claws ravaging villages, and a figure shrouded in darkness standing at their helm. Then the voice returned, clearer this time, reverberating through his skull. "Awaken, my heir." Naruto gasped, his body convulsing as the voice grew louder, filling him with overwhelming power and hunger. He felt his flesh mend and strengthen, his senses sharpening to an unnatural degree. When the pain finally subsided, he rose to his feet, trembling but alive. Alive, and reborn. He stumbled to a pool of water and stared at his reflection. His blue eyes now glowed crimson, slid like a predator's. Black veins traced his skin, and his canines had lengthened into fangs. His heart raced at the sight, but instead of fear, he felt exhilaration. The voice spoke again, and this time, Naruto understood. "You are my vessel, my blood made flesh. Muzan Kibutsuji, the progenitor of demons, lives within you. Through you, I shall rise again." Naruto's lips curled into a smile filled with malice and triumph. The world that had cast him aside would now bow before him. He would no longer be the pitiful child begging for scraps of love and acceptance. He would become a god. The journey back to the surface was different. Shadows seemed to part for him, and the air itself felt heavier, as though the world recognized his transformation. When he emerged from the forest, the stars above appeared dimmer, as if afraid to shine too brightly in his presence. He returned to the village under the cover of night, his hunger gnawing at him. The scent of blood called to him, and he found himself lurking in the alleys, observing his prey. A drunken villager staggered toward him, muttering curses about the demon brat. Naruto stepped into the light, and the man froze. "You," the villager spat, reaching for a bottle to throw. In an instant, Naruto was upon him. His hand pierced the man's chest, and blood splattered across the walls. The villager's screams died as Naruto drained him dry, savoring the warmth that spread through his veins. Power thrummed within him, and the hunger subsided, but only for a moment. Wiping his mouth, Naruto turned his gaze to the village. Tonight had been a test, a glimpse of what he was now capable of. But this was only the beginning. He spent the following weeks in secrecy, honing his abilities. The power of Muzan allowed him to create demons, and he began experimenting on animals and insects, twisting them into monstrous forms. Each success fueled his growing ambition, and with every failure, his hatred for the village deepened. Word of disappearing villagers and strange sightings spread, but no one suspected Naruto. He remained the invisible orphan, ignored and forgotten. Until one day, when Mito confronted him. She had noticed his accents and the changes in his demeanor. "What are you hiding?" she demanded, her chakra flaring. Naruto smirked. "You should leave, Mito. This isn't your fight." But Mito refused, attacking him with chains of chakra. Naruto dodged effortlessly, his speed and strength far surpassing hers. With a flick of his wrist, he sent her crashing into a tree, blood dripping from her lips. "Stop," she cried. "What happened to you?" Naruto loomed over her, his crimson eyes glowing. "I woke up," he said. "And now, it's your turn to sleep." He raised his hand to strike, but hesitated. A flicker of the old Naruto surfaced, but it was quickly drowned by the voice of Muzan. "Finish her." Naruto clenched his fist and stepped back. "Not yet." He turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Mito broken and terrified. The attack sent ripples through Konoha, and the village began to mobilize. They spoke of a demon in their midst, but they had no idea it was the boy they had scorned for years. Naruto stood at the edge of the village, watching the flickering lights. His new followers, a handful of demons he had created, waited in silence. "This is only the beginning," Naruto said, his voice cold and resolute. "Konoha will burn, and from its ashes, my kingdom will rise." The night swallowed his words, but the promise lingered in the air, a harbinger of the storm to come. Naruto sat in the shadows of the cave, his crimson eyes glowing faintly as he observed the trembling men before him. The rogue shinobi, bound by chakra-infused chains, whimpered as Naruto stepped closer. The scent of fear hung heavy in the air, fueling the hunger clawing at Naruto's insides. "You should be grateful," Naruto said softly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "I'm about to grant you purpose." The man struggled against his bindings, panic overriding any semblance of dignity. "Please, I'll do anything. Don't kill me." Naruto knelt, his fingers grazing the man's trembling cheek. "You misunderstand. Death is mercy. I offer something greater." Before the man could scream, Naruto plunged his claws into the man's chest. Darkness seeped from Naruto's fingers, spreading through the man's veins like ink. The rogue shinobi convulsed, his cries twisting into guttural growls as his body writhed and changed. Flesh hardened, nails sharpened, and his eyes turned a hellish crimson. When it was over, the man collapsed to the ground, gasping as his transformation settled. He raised his head, his expression one of awe and terror. "Master," he rasped, bowing low. Naruto smiled, pleased with the results. The experiment had been a success. He extended his hand, and the newly born demon took it, his loyalty solidified. Naruto had learned much in the weeks following his transformation. Muzan's blood granted him not only immense power but also the ability to create subordinates who would follow his will without question. These demons retained fragments of their former selves but were reborn with hunger and obedience. His experiments did not stop there. Naruto sought out criminals, rogue shinobi, and wandering mercenaries, offering them salvation through transformation. Most resisted, but all eventually succumbed. His army grew, and with it, his influence. Bandit camps and underground organizations became his testing grounds. Naruto and his demons descended upon them like predators in the night, leaving trails of blood and terror. Survivors spread rumors of a monster that walked among men, a shadow that could not be stopped. Fear became his greatest weapon. One evening, Naruto stood atop a ridge overlooking his smoldering camp, his newly formed lieutenants kneeling behind him. Among them was Riku, a former assassin who had proven particularly resilient during his transformation, and Saya, a kunoichi who had surrendered willingly, seduced by Naruto's power and charisma. Saya approached him, her eyes gleaming with admiration. "You've given me strength, my lord." Let me stand by your side forever. Naruto turned to her, brushing a lock of her dark hair from her face. You will have your place in my kingdom, he promised, his voice low and commanding. Saya bowed deeply, her devotion unwavering. As days turned to weeks, Naruto's charisma drew more followers, especially women who saw him not as a monster but as a savior. He used his dominance and charm to bind them to him, weaving a web of loyalty and admiration. Each woman added to his growing harem, serving not only as warriors but as confidants and advisors. Among them was Kaed, a wandering priestess who had once sought to banish him. Her attempt had failed, and instead, she had fallen under his spell. Her transformation was slower, more deliberate, as Naruto allowed her to keep fragments of her faith to manipulate her devotion. Naruto stood in the center of his growing fortress, once an abandoned ruin now teeming with his creations. He looked upon his followers with pride. They were his tools, his weapons, but also his family. The village that had cast him out had forced him to find strength in darkness, and now that darkness was his empire. The land of fire trembled as news of his attacks spread. The daimyo and Konoha began mobilizing forces to confront the growing threat, but Naruto welcomed the challenge. He needed more victims, more subjects, and more power. One night, Naruto gathered his lieutenants and outlined his next move. We will strike at the trade routes next, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. Merchants, guards, nobles, they will all fall. Spread fear. Make them beg for mercy that will never come. The demons roared in approval, their bloodlust palpable. As the meeting dispersed, Naruto felt a presence approach. Saya knelt before him, her gaze fierce. Let me lead the next raid, my lord. I will not fail you. Naruto studied her before nodding. Go. Show them the power of my blood. Saya's lips curled into a predatory smile as she departed, and Naruto turned back to the shadows. He could feel the hunger growing again, and he welcomed it. The darkness was no longer his curse. It was his weapon, and soon the world would bow to it. Naruto stood on the edge of a rocky outcrop, gazing down at Konoha under the veil of night. The village looked peaceful, but he knew the tranquility was a lie. Beneath its calm facade, it pulsed with the same hypocrisy and cruelty that had cast him out years ago. His crimson eyes gleamed as the moonlight reflected off them. The time for reckoning had come. Beside him knelt Saya and Kaed, their transformed forms blending seamlessly with the shadows. Behind them, his growing legion of demons waited silently, their hunger barely contained. Naruto raised a hand, and the air stilled as they hung on his next command. We begin tonight, he said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. We will dismantle this village, piece by piece. Spread chaos. Let them feel despair before we crush them completely. Saya stepped forward, her sharp claws gleaming. And the shinobi? What of those who resist? Naruto's lips curled into a dark smile. Kill them all. But bring me the ones who interest you. Some may yet prove useful. As the demons moved out, Naruto remained behind, his eyes fixed on the Hokage monument. His heart burned as he looked upon Minato's carved face, the man who had chosen duty and favoritism over his own son. Tonight, Naruto would make him regret that choice. The first wave of attacks hit the outskirts. Demons swarmed the patrols, tearing through defenses with terrifying ease. Cries echoed into the night, and the scent of blood filled the air. Naruto watched from a distance, savoring the panic. Hinata Hyuga stood at the Hyuga compound, her Byakugan activated as she sensed the approaching chaos. Her heart raced, but not out of fear. It was something deeper and unease she couldn't name. She had heard the rumors of a monster leading an army, but she couldn't bring herself to believe them. When the gates of the compound burst open, and the demons poured in, Hinata fought with everything she had. But it wasn't enough. The creatures overwhelmed her guards, forcing her back until she found herself cornered. Before the killing blow could land, however, a voice rang out. Stop. Hinata froze as the demons fell back. From the shadows, Naruto emerged. She gasped, unable to reconcile the image of the boy she had admired with the terrifying figure before her. His crimson eyes locked onto hers, and she felt an inexplicable pull. Hinata, he said softly. You've always been kind. That's why I'll give you a choice. Her heart pounded. Naruto? What have you done? What I had to, he replied, stepping closer. This village betrayed me, but I won't make the same mistake they did. Join me, Hinata. Serve me, and I will give you strength beyond your imagination. Hinata hesitated, but the sight of her fallen comrades and the overwhelming presence of Naruto broke her resolve. She knelt before him, her voice trembling. I'll follow you. Naruto reached down, lifting her chin. You won't regret this. As the night dragged on, Naruto moved through the village, his forces spreading terror. Ino Yamanaka, caught in the chaos, found herself cornered by Naruto's lieutenants. She fought valiantly, but like Hinata, she too succumbed to the allure of Naruto's power. You crave acknowledgement, don't you? Naruto whispered as he circled her. I can give you more than that. I can make you indispensable. Tears streamed down Ino's face as she surrendered, her voice breaking. Just don't leave me behind. Naruto's harem grew, their devotion fueled by admiration, fear, and desire. He used their skills and connections to infiltrate the remaining defenses, dismantling Konoha's structure from within. The Hokage called for an emergency council, but Naruto was already steps ahead. His spies reported their every move, and his demons prepared to strike at the heart of the village. As dawn approached, Naruto stood in the Hokage's office, the bodies of Umbu scattered at his feet. Minato faced him, his expression a mixture of horror and regret. Naruto, what have you become? Minato asked. Naruto stepped closer, his voice cold. What you made me. Minato lunged, but Naruto was faster. He seized his father by the throat, lifting him off the ground. You sacrificed me for your precious village. Now I'll return the favor. With a final, brutal twist, Naruto dropped Minato's lifeless body and turned to the blood-stained room. The fall of Konoha had begun, and there was no turning back. Naruto stood atop the hill, his crimson eyes gleaming in the pale moonlight, his presence like a dark omen to the world. The wind swept through his hair, and the night felt heavy, oppressive, as though nature itself recoiled at the power he now wielded. His body was no longer the same, no longer just the boy who had been shunned by his village. He had transcended that, becoming something greater, something darker. His body had mutated, twisted by the immense power coursing through his veins. Tentacles slithered from his back, each one brimming with his malevolent energy. His skin bore the marks of his new existence, black veins streaked across his face, and his teeth had elongated into sharp, deadly fangs. The time had come. No longer would he be content with mere vengeance. He would take everything, he would dominate. He had built his army, a force of demons twisted and shaped by his will. They were his creations, born from the very flesh of his being, each one more monstrous than the last. As he looked out at the vast forest below, his eyes gleamed with excitement. The world had no idea what was about to hit it. With a slow, deliberate step, he descended the hill. As he walked, the air seemed to tremble around him, the ground cracking beneath his feet as if it, too, feared the coming storm. The first of his demon forces, grotesque, humanoid creatures with dark, chitinous armor and blood-red eyes, followed in tow, their movements unnaturally fluid. They had no true will of their own, just like his human army, they were nothing more than tools for his domination. He raised a hand to the sky, the stars dimming as his chakras surged outward, shaping itself into vast tendrils of raw, destructive energy. His aura expanded, pulsating like a heartbeat, filling the air with the stench of death. In the distance, the watchmen stationed at the borders of the Hidden Leaf village were the first to feel it. They looked up in horror as the sky darkened, a menacing pressure suffocating the land. Naruto's voice echoed through the silence, booming like the roar of a god. I am the Demon King, the one who will bring this world to its knees. I declare war on the 5 great nations. I shall take them all. One by one. The first attack came swiftly. His demon army advanced like a tide, overwhelming the borders of the Land of Fire. The shinobi stationed at the outposts never stood a chance. Naruto's tentacles lashed out, ripping through their ranks with terrifying speed and precision. His flesh manipulation abilities allowed him to alter his form at will, morphing into a terrifying beast with monstrous claws, tendrils, and jagged fangs. The squads of shinobi who had once taken pride in their strength were nothing more than fodder for him now. Each slash of his hand left destruction in its wake. He didn't need to fight with any strategy, his overwhelming power was enough to crush everything before him. The soldiers who did manage to engage him with ninjutsu found their attacks absorbed, their chakra drained, their bodies broken with a mere flick of his wrist. Some attempted to flee, but it was futile. Their comrades were slaughtered, their screams silenced by the sound of his growing army. As the battle raged on, a small group of kunoichi found themselves trapped, their bodies pinned down by Naruto's monstrous creations. Among them was a woman with long, dark hair and a graceful yet deadly presence. Her eyes were filled with terror, but there was a flicker of something else: curiosity, perhaps even desire. Naruto approached her, his eyes narrowing. She was a part of the Hidden Leaf's elite, a skilled warrior, one who had earned her place. But none of that mattered now. As he towered over her, she glanced up, meeting his gaze with defiance. You're nothing more than a monster, she spat, her voice laced with venom. Naruto chuckled darkly. Monster? Maybe. But I'm a monster with a purpose. And you will serve that purpose, whether you wish to or not. His words were cruel, but they were not without truth. The demon army had been crafted from his will, and those who stood in his path would be forced to bow before him or be crushed beneath his boot. The kunoichi, recognizing the futility of resistance, remained silent. She had seen his power firsthand, the destruction he was capable of. There was no escape. And as she gazed at him, she saw something else in his eyes: a strange allure, an undeniable presence that radiated dominance. It was the power of a king who demanded loyalty. Naruto raised his hand, and the demon forces halted. His tentacles retracted, and his monstrous form returned to that of a human. Join me, he said softly. You can continue to fight for a cause that's already lost, or you can stand by my side and help me reshape the world. The kunoichi didn't know why, but something within her stirred. Perhaps it was the desperation, the need for survival. Perhaps it was the strange power that called to her. Whatever it was, she found herself nodding, stepping forward to join him. Good girl, Naruto purred, a dark smile crossing his face. His army continued to spread, sweeping through the villages of the Land of Fire like a plague. Each village they conquered was transformed into a stronghold under Naruto's control. The once peaceful towns became twisted, monstrous reflections of his own darkness. The villagers who survived were either enslaved or turned into demons, joining his growing legion. Those who resisted were slaughtered without hesitation. It was not just a conquest, it was an assimilation, a way of making the entire world bow to him. And the more villages he claimed, the more his power grew. His demon army expanded, made up of human soldiers turned into monstrous, twisted versions of themselves. Some of the shinobi who had been captured, broken by his power, willingly joined him, offering their loyalty in exchange for survival. And then, there were the women. Some of the kunoichi who had once fought against him, others who had simply been caught in the wake of his destruction. They were drawn to him, whether by fear, by desire, or by the undeniable allure of his power. One by one, they came to him, pledging their loyalty, their bodies, and their minds to the Demon King. He did not force them. No, they came willingly. They saw what he was, what he would become. And they knew that the world was on the verge of a new era, an era where he would rule supreme. They would serve him, not just as warriors, but as his followers, his harem, his most loyal servants. Their hearts were his, whether they understood it or not. And so, the demon army rose. It was unstoppable. Its power grew with each passing day, and soon, the 5 great nations would know the true meaning of terror. They would learn that Naruto Uzumaki, the boy they had once cast aside, was no longer just a weapon of destruction. He was a king whose reign would not be contested. As Naruto stood on the edge of a conquered village, watching the flames rise in the distance, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The world was his for the taking. And no one would dare to challenge him. Not anymore. The air in Konoha was thick with tension. It was as if the entire village held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The once lively streets of the Hidden Leaf had now become eerily quiet, every corner shrouded in fear. The villagers whispered in hushed tones about the dark force that had emerged. Naruto Uzumaki, the boy they had once known, now a demon king who threatened to tear apart the very fabric of their world. Inside the Hokage's office, the mood was grim. Tsunade, the 5th Hokage, sat at her desk, her face etched with worry. Her hands trembled as she examined the intelligence reports. Each one confirmed what they had feared. Naruto's army was growing by the day, his demon forces sweeping through the land of fire like a plague. Entire villages had fallen, and the survivors were either turned into twisted versions of themselves or broken, forced to swear fealty to the one who had once been their comrade. How did this happen? Tsunade muttered to herself, her voice heavy with disbelief. How did we let this monster rise? Jiraiya stood beside her, his usually jovial expression replaced with something more solemn. The loss of his former student weighed heavily on him. He had trained Naruto, mentored him, and yet, he had failed to see the darkness brewing within. This wasn't the boy he had raised, but a being of unimaginable power, someone beyond even the most skilled shinobi. We underestimated him, Jiraiya said quietly, his tone laced with regret. When he unlocked those powers, we should have known that it was only a matter of time before he became something else. But now, we have to stop him. Tsunade's gaze turned to him, her eyes burning with determination. How? How do we stop him when he's become this thing? Jiraiya's lips tightened into a grim line. There's a sealing technique, one that might be able to bind his power, contain it. I've heard of it, but it's not something that can be done lightly. It requires a skilled practitioner, and even then, it's not a guaranteed success. Tsunade nodded, her mind racing. Then we'll find a way. We have to do something before he destroys everything we've built. As the Hokage, Tsunade had the responsibility to protect Konoha, but Naruto's power had become something far beyond even her abilities. She couldn't do this alone, and neither could Jiraiya. They needed help. They needed every shinobi they could muster. Gather the council, Tsunade said, her voice firm. We need to prepare for war. The next day, Konoha was alive with activity, a sense of urgency in the air as the remaining shinobi scrambled to prepare. Weapons were sharpened, armor fitted, and chakra reserves replenished. But it was all futile. Naruto had already proven his overwhelming strength, and no amount of preparation would change that fact. Sakura Haruno stood in the courtyard of the Hokage's palace, staring up at the darkened sky. Her mind was filled with a whirlwind of thoughts, each one darker than the last. She couldn't help but remember the Naruto she had known, the boy who had fought so hard for acceptance, the boy who had been her friend, her teammate. Now, he was a demon, a force of nature that they had no hope of stopping. We need to stop him, Sakura whispered to herself, clenching her fists. We have to save him, somehow. We can't let this be the end. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just about saving Naruto anymore. It was about protecting everything they had fought for, everything that Konoha had built. If they didn't act now, there would be nothing left to save. She was interrupted by Tsunade's voice calling her from behind. Sakura, I need you to listen carefully. Sakura turned to face her sensei, a sense of dread filling her chest. Tsunade's face was tense, her usual confidence replaced by a rare flicker of uncertainty. She had seen this look before. It was the look of someone who was faced with a decision that could determine the fate of many. What is it, Tsunade-sama? Sakura asked, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume her. I'm going with Jiraiya to attempt the sealing technique, Tsunade replied, her gaze unwavering. But I need you and the others to prepare for the worst. If this fails, we may not have much time. Sakura's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by prepare for the worst? Tsunade sighed deeply. It's possible that if the sealing fails, Naruto will come here. He'll destroy everything, and we won't be able to stop him. Sakura's stomach turned at the thought. But we can't just give up. There has to be another way. Tsunade placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. I know you're scared. We all are. But we can't let that cloud our judgment. Our only hope now is to do what we can to contain him. If we don't, Konoha won't survive. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Jiraiya and Tsunade prepared for the sealing technique, gathering the necessary components while the other shinobi fortified the village. Sakura, determined to help, stood by, ready to lend her chakra to whatever mission they needed her for. But as time passed, the sense of dread in the village only grew stronger. The reports from the front lines painted a grim picture. Naruto's demon army was closing in, and there was no sign of slowing down. By evening, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the village. The sky above was filled with dark clouds, and the wind howled as if it, too, were caught in the grip of something unnatural. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. The first attack came without warning. The earth split open, and from it emerged the monstrous figures of Naruto's demon army. They were grotesque, with twisted limbs and glowing red eyes, each one more terrifying than the last. The ground was littered with debris as the demons surged forward, tearing through the village walls with ease. The shinobi who attempted to engage them were cut down with brutal efficiency, their attempts to fight back completely useless against the overwhelming force of Naruto's creations. Stay back! Tsunade shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. This is our fight. But it was already too late. Naruto had arrived. He appeared in the heart of the village, walking slowly, his crimson eyes locked onto Tsunade and Jiraiya. The air seemed to grow colder with each step he took, his demonic presence suffocating everything in its wake. His tentacles lashed out, tearing through buildings and scattering shinobi like ragdolls. Jiraiya, Naruto said, his voice carrying an unsettling calmness. Tsunade. I'm disappointed. You actually thought you could stop me. Jiraiya stepped forward, his face lined with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Naruto, this isn't you. You don't have to do this. You're not a demon. Naruto's lips curled into a sinister smile. I am exactly what I was meant to be. I've transcended this pathetic world. You think you can stop me with some old sealing technique? It's laughable. Tsunade and Jiraiya shared a brief glance, their eyes filled with the same resolve. They knew they had no choice now. The sealing had to work, there was no other option. With a single movement, Tsunade and Jiraiya began to form the necessary hand signs, their chakras swirling around them. The ground trembled as the powerful seal took form, a massive, intricate array of symbols that glowed with an ethereal light. But as the energy built to its peak, Naruto raised a hand, his power surging to a terrifying level. Foolish, he sneered. Before Tsunade or Jiraiya could react, Naruto unleashed a wave of destructive energy, the force of which shattered the ceiling array. The light flickered, sputtered, and died as the energy dispersed into nothingness. Tsunade's eyes widened in disbelief. It didn't work. Naruto's laughter echoed through the village, a sound that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. Did you really think a seal could contain me? I've already adapted. You are no longer a threat to me. With a wave of his hand, Naruto summoned his demon army once more. This time, however, they were no longer mindless soldiers. They were his followers, loyal to the end. And as Naruto's power overwhelmed the battlefield, Sakura and Tsunade attempted to fight back. But it was all for nothing. The next moment, they were captured. The once proud and indomitable shinobi of Konoha were now his prisoners. Naruto's gaze fell upon them, a dark amusement glinting in his eyes as he observed the two women who had once been his comrades. "You're mine now," he said, his voice cold, as he drew them closer to him with his overwhelming force. In his hands, Konoha's fate was sealed. The village of Konoha had once been a proud and bustling symbol of hope, unity, and strength in the shinobi world. But now, the once vibrant streets were eerily silent, the air thick with the weight of impending doom. The villagers had all but abandoned their homes, taking shelter wherever they could, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the very place they had once called home was on the verge of destruction. Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had been their hope, their light, now stood at the head of an army of demons. His eyes glowed with an unholy crimson light, his presence as terrifying as it was undeniable. He had become a god, a being with the power to reshape the world as he saw fit. The Leaf Village, the one place that had failed him, was now nothing more than a playground for his wrath. The walls of Konoha, once strong and impenetrable, now stood as little more than a symbol of resistance in the face of an unstoppable force. Naruto had already made his intentions clear. He would tear down every last vestige of the village, leaving nothing but rubble and ash in his wake. There was no mercy left in him. No remorse. Only the cold, unyielding desire to see Konoha fall to its knees before him. Inside the Hokage's office, Tsunade stood by the window, her face grim as she watched the fires that had started to burn in the distance. The chaos was spreading faster than they could have anticipated, the sound of distant screams reaching her ears. The once proud Konoha was slowly being consumed by the very force it had once sought to control. The weight of the moment hung heavy in her chest. She knew that there was no turning back now. Kakashi Hatake, the former leader of Team 7, stood beside her, his expression unreadable. His one visible eye, calm yet filled with sorrow, scanned the destruction unfolding before them. The battle was already lost. Naruto's power was far too overwhelming, his control over his demonic forces absolute. "He's too strong, Tsunade," Kakashi said, his voice low, resigned. "There's nothing we can do. We can't fight him." Tsunade turned her head slowly to look at him, her eyes reflecting the same pain, the same understanding. She had known Naruto since he was a child. She had seen his struggle, his determination, his hope. But she had also seen the darkness take root in him, the point of no return where his heart had hardened beyond repair. And now, that darkness was consuming everything they had fought to protect. "I never thought it would come to this," Tsunade whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never thought he'd become this." But the truth was undeniable. Naruto had changed. The boy they had known, the boy who had dreamed of becoming Hokage, was gone. In his place stood a creature of unimaginable power, a demon who cared for nothing but his own conquest. Kakashi sighed, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "We can still try to slow him down, hold him off for as long as we can." "No," Tsunade said firmly. "It's over. We can't fight him anymore." The door to the Hokage's office creaked open, and the remaining Jonin of Konoha entered. They were battered, bruised, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. They knew what was coming. There was no escaping it. They had fought valiantly, but against Naruto's overwhelming strength, it had been nothing more than a futile attempt to delay the inevitable. "We've lost the outer defenses," Asuma Sarutobi said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "The demons are inside the village. There's no way to hold them back. We have to fight," Kiba Inyazuka said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't just give up." But even as he spoke, the sound of crashing footsteps echoed through the village. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Naruto's demon army marched forward, their grotesque forms filling the streets with terror. The villagers who had attempted to flee were cut down without mercy, their screams echoing through the air. "He's here," Shikamaru said softly, his face grim. "This is it?" Tsunade turned to face them, her expression hardening. "We fight to the end. We protect Konoha as long as we can." But even as the words left her mouth, the air grew colder, the oppressive weight of Naruto's power closing in on them. There was no chance of victory. Not anymore. Naruto stood at the gates of Konoha, his eyes glowing with an unsettling light. His tentacles lashed out, tearing through the village walls with ease. The stone and wood crumbled beneath his power, the sound of destruction ringing through the air. His demon army followed behind him, their bloodthirsty growls echoing through the streets. "Is this all you've got, Konoha?" Naruto's voice boomed, carrying across the village like a death knell. "Pathetic. Your walls, your defenses, none of it matters." With a single gesture, Naruto unleashed a wave of energy, tearing apart entire buildings in seconds. The shock wave sent the remaining shinobi flying, their bodies slamming into the walls and streets with sickening force. "Don't let him through," Kakashi shouted, drawing his sword as he charged forward. He was the first to meet Naruto, his Sharingan spinning in a desperate attempt to anticipate his movements. But Naruto was faster, too fast. Before Kakashi could react, Naruto's tentacle lashed out, striking him across the chest and sending him crashing into the ground. "Pathetic," Naruto sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You always were weak, Kakashi. No matter how hard you try, you can never match my power." Kakashi struggled to rise, his body battered and broken. But there was no fight left in him. He could see it in Naruto's eyes, the same eyes that had once held hope, now filled with an insatiable hunger for destruction. The other Jonin charged in, attempting to engage Naruto's demon army, but it was no use. They were outmatched at every turn. Shikamaru's strategies failed to account for Naruto's adaptability, and Asuma's fire techniques were no match for the overwhelming forces that Naruto had at his command. One by one, the remaining defenders fell. Inyazuka, with his faithful Akamaru, fought valiantly, but even the bond they shared could not save them. His last cry was one of defiance, even as the demons overwhelmed him. And then, it was just Tsunade, Kakashi, and the remaining shinobi, holding their ground in a final, desperate stand. They had given everything they had, but it was clear Konoha would fall. Naruto watched them, his eyes cold, his expression unmoving. "So this is your final stand, huh?" he said, his voice calm, almost detached. "You think you can stop me? You can't. You never could." Tsunade stepped forward, her fists clenched, her resolve unwavering. "Naruto. Please. This isn't you. You can still come back from this." Naruto's expression softened for a moment, a fleeting glimpse of the boy he had once been. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by the cold, calculating gaze of the demon he had become. "No," he said simply, his voice low. "This is who I am now. And there's nothing you can do to stop me." With a flick of his wrist, Naruto summoned a massive wave of dark energy, engulfing the area around him. The remaining Jonin were caught in the blast, their bodies disintegrating in an instant. Tsunade was the last to fall, her body battered and broken, her vision blurry as she collapsed to her knees. She looked up at Naruto, the boy she had once loved like his son, and whispered, "I'm sorry." "Naruto." Naruto didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, his eyes cold as he surveyed the destruction around him. Konoha was no more. Its walls had crumbled, its people had fallen, and now, it was his. He had claimed it, just as he had claimed the rest of the world. And as the smoke cleared, the only thing that remained was Naruto, the Demon King, standing victorious amidst the ruins of the village that had once been his home. The wind howled through the streets of the fallen Leaf Village, now renamed the Demon Capital. The once thriving heart of the shinobi world had become a dark and twisted reflection of its former self. The buildings, once filled with the sounds of children playing and merchants peddling their wares, now stood as silent sentinels to the rise of a new empire. Smoke still billowed from the remains of homes and shops, the scent of charred wood and flesh hanging heavy in the air. The village had been transformed, no longer a symbol of hope, but a kingdom of despair, built upon the foundation of terror and destruction. Naruto Uzumaki stood at the heart of his new domain, his crimson eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he gazed upon the ruins. He had done it. He had torn down the village that had once rejected him, that had scorned him for his heritage, and rebuilt it in his image. The walls of Konoha had crumbled, but in their place had risen something far greater, something that would endure for centuries to come. The demon capital was no longer a place of protection for the weak and the powerless. It was a bastion of strength, a testament to the unyielding power of its ruler. And Naruto, the Demon King, was its undisputed sovereign. The streets were lined with banners bearing his sigil, a blackened, demonic fist clasping a crimson flame, and the air was thick with the presence of his army, his loyal followers. The demons he had summoned in his conquest now roamed the streets, keeping order with a brutal efficiency. The remnants of the villagers who had survived Konoha's fall had been subjugated, their lives now bound to the will of their new overlord. Some had been speared, but only as slaves, tools to be used to further Naruto's ambitions. But there was another group in his empire, a more prominent one. His harem. The women who had once been his enemies, the kunoichi who had fought against him, had now become his most trusted and powerful allies. Each had been broken, molded, and brought into his fold, their wills bent to his own. They were no longer mere weapons or pawns in his game, they were queens in his new empire, treated with a respect that was as dangerous as it was intimate. Hinata Hyuga, once a timid girl with a gentle heart, now stood beside him as his first queen. Her Byakugan, the symbol of the Hyuga clan's power, had been twisted by Naruto's dark influence, granting her abilities that no one could rival. She had been the first to accept him, to understand the depths of his pain, and now, she ruled at his side, her presence an embodiment of grace and power. She had once looked at him with compassion, but now, her gaze was cold, calculated, a reflection of the woman she had become in his empire. Sakura Haruno, the woman who had once loved him, stood at his other side. Her betrayal still stung, but in the depths of her soul, she knew she belonged here, at the top. Her medical skills had been invaluable in keeping Naruto's forces strong, but it was her ability to manipulate others that had truly earned her a place in his inner circle. She had learned to use her beauty, her charm, and her intellect to manipulate the men around her, bending them to her will as she worked tirelessly to further Naruto's reign. Tsunade, the former Hokage, had been forced into submission, her once proud spirit shattered beneath Naruto's overwhelming power. But even in her brokenness, she held influence. She had trained the next generation of shinobi, and in the demon capital, her medical knowledge and leadership skills were vital. She had been given a position of authority, but it was one forged in the fires of humiliation and defeat. The once great warrior had become a mere shadow of her former self, and yet, in her defeat, she had become a cornerstone of the empire that Naruto was building. And then there was Temari, the fierce kunoichi from Tsunagakure. She had been a warrior from the beginning, and even now, her fierce spirit burned with an intensity that rivaled Naruto's own. She had not been broken in the same way as the others. No, her strength had been recognized, and she had been elevated, given a seat of power in Naruto's court. She commanded legions of demons with the ruthless efficiency, her wind jutsu carving paths through the battlefield, leaving destruction in her wake. To her, Naruto was not a god to be worshipped, but a force of nature to be respected, and she demanded that respect from all who served him. Naruto's empire was one built on power and decadence, where strength was the ultimate currency, and loyalty was the price of survival. The women who had been brought into his harem were more than just his companions, they were his partners in this new world he had forged. They had been given positions of influence, treated not as mere possessions but as rulers in their own right. They governed their domains with brutal efficiency, their loyalty to Naruto ensuring that the empire would never falter. But even as his empire grew, there were whispers that Naruto could feel in the air. There were those who feared him, those who sought to undermine him, and those who sought to rise against him. But Naruto was not afraid. He had crushed Konoha, he had obliterated the 5 great nations, and now, there was nothing left that could stand in his way. The demon capital was his to command, and he would rule it with an iron fist, treating his enemies as nothing more than stepping stones on his path to greater power. He stood in the grand hall of the newly constructed palace, a towering structure of obsidian and steel, its walls adorned with the symbols of his empire. The room was filled with his closest allies, his harem, and the most powerful members of his demon army. They stood in reverence before him, their eyes filled with admiration, awe, and a subtle fear. Naruto's gaze swept across the room, his crimson eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. He had done what no one thought possible. He had brought down the greatest shinobi village in the world and replaced it with a kingdom of his own making. He had become a god, and now, he would reshape the world in his image. Tonight, Naruto's voice echoed through the hall, we celebrate the birth of a new era. The age of the Demon Empire has begun. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. And then, slowly, his queens Hinata, Sakura, Temari, and Tsunade stepped forward, their movements graceful, yet commanding. They each took their place by his side, their eyes filled with pride and power. They were his, and in this new world, they would rule alongside him, their fates intertwined with his own. The feast that followed was one of indulgence and decadence. The finest foods, the richest wines, and the most extravagant displays of wealth were brought before them. The demons, once savage and uncontrollable, had been transformed into loyal servants, waiting on their masters with the reverence that bordered on worship. Naruto reclined at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over the gathered guests. His empire was growing, expanding with each passing day. And yet, there was still work to be done. He had to ensure that his rule was absolute, that no one could challenge his authority. The 5 great nations were no more, but new threats would always arise: rivals, dissenters, those who sought to claim his throne. But for now, there was peace. And in this moment of triumph, Naruto allowed himself a rare smile. He had achieved everything he had ever desired. He had become the Demon King, and there was no turning back. As the night wore on, Naruto's eyes met Hinata's. She was seated beside him, her expression as cold and calculating as ever. But there was a hint of something else in her gaze, something more than mere loyalty. It was a bond, forged in the fires of battle, of bloodshed, and of power. She had been his first, and she would remain at his side as long as he ruled. And as the moon rose high in the sky, casting its pale light over the demon capital, Naruto knew that this was only the beginning. His empire would grow, its influence spreading across the world. The Demon King had been born, and no one would dare to challenge his reign. The world would bend to his will, and all who opposed him would fall. The Demon Empire was here to stay. The air was thick with the scent of blood and ash. Fields once lush with crops now lay in ruin, trampled beneath the boots of an unstoppable army. Smoke rose from the remnants of villages, curling toward the sky like the fingers of a dying man begging for mercy. But there would be no mercy, not in this world shaped by the will of the Demon King. Naruto stood at the edge of the battlefield, his crimson eyes scanning the devastation before him. The remnants of the Land of Lightning's forces littered the ground, their bodies twisted and broken. The Hokage had fought valiantly, leading his shinobi with unyielding resolve, but resolve meant nothing against Naruto's might. In the end, ace speed and brute strength had been no match for the dark power that surged through Naruto's veins. The Hokage's lifeless body now hung from a blackened spire in the center of the ruined battlefield, a message to all who dared to oppose the Demon King's expansion. Behind Naruto, his army of demons stood in silent formation, their monstrous forms barely restrained as they awaited their master's next command. These creatures, born of his flesh and chakra, were bound to his will, an extension of his rage and ambition. But they were more than beasts, they were symbols of his power, his dominion over life and death. Among them stood his generals, handpicked from those who had fallen before him and been reborn in his service. Each bore marks of their transformation, twisted horns, glowing eyes, or claws that dripped with corrosive venom. They had been powerful shinobi in life, and in death, they had become even stronger. Karui, once a proud kunoichi of Kyomagakure, now knelt before him, her once vibrant red hair now darkened to black, her skin pale as marble. She had been the first to fall in the battle against the Land of Lightning, but Naruto had seen potential in her rage and fire. With his dark chakra, he had remade her into something more, his blade of vengeance. "My lord," Karui said, her voice sharp and cold. "The remaining forces have fled into the mountains. Shall we pursue?" Naruto's gaze shifted to the distant peaks. They were jagged and treacherous, a natural fortress that the surviving shinobi would hope to use to their advantage. But Naruto had no interest in games of hide and seek. He raised his hand, and the air trembled as dark energy crackled around his fingertips. "No," he said, his voice echoing across the field. "Burn them out." Karui's eyes glowed with crimson light as she turned to relay his command to the demons. Within moments, flames erupted along the mountainside, devouring trees and stone alike. The screams of the fleeing shinobi echoed down into the valley, but Naruto felt no pity. They had chosen to resist. This was their reward. The destruction spread quickly, and as the fires raged, Naruto turned his attention back to his generals. At his side, Hinata stood with an air of quiet authority. Her once gentle demeanor had hardened in the fires of conquest, and her Byakugan now glowed with an unnatural intensity. She had become his shadow queen, overseeing intelligence and espionage across the conquered lands. "Report," Naruto said, and Hinata bowed her head before speaking. "The Land of Wind has fallen," she said, her voice steady. Temari led the assault personally. "The Hokage is dead, and the survivors have sworn fealty to us. The Land of Earth has begun negotiations, but they are stalling, hoping to find an ally before committing." Naruto's lips curled into a smile. "They'll find none." "The Land of Water remains silent," Hinata continued. "Their Mizukage has fortified the capital, but our spies report unrest among the ranks. We may be able to turn some of their leaders to our side." Naruto nodded. "Good. Let them crumble from within." "And the Land of Fire?" Hinata hesitated, and Naruto's smile faded. "Speak." "There are rumors," she said. "A group of survivors from Konoha has resurfaced. They've been gathering allies and preparing to resist." Naruto's eyes darkened. "Who leads them?" "We don't know yet," Hinata admitted. "But there have been reports of Kakashi's Sharingan." A flicker of annoyance crossed Naruto's face, but he quickly crushed it. Kakashi had survived longer than most, but even he would fall in the end. "Send Sakura," Naruto said. "I want his head." Hinata bowed and turned to leave, but Naruto reached out, catching her wrist. She froze, her Byakugan pulsing faintly as she looked up at him. "Be careful," he said, his voice low but firm. Hinata's eyes softened, just for a moment, before she nodded and slipped away. Naruto watched her go, then turned back to the battlefield. The fires were dying down, leaving only smoldering ash in their wake. The land of lightning was his, and soon, the rest of the world would follow. As his generals prepared for the next phase of their campaign, Naruto stepped away from the chaos, retreating to the fortress he had constructed in the heart of the demon capital. The palace was a towering structure of black stone, its walls lined with crimson banners that bore his sigil. Within its halls, his harem awaited queens who ruled beside him, each bound to him by loyalty, fear, or desire. Sakura was there, her pink hair flowing like silk as she pored over maps and battle plans. Tsunade stood beside her, her once proud expression now softened by submission. Temari leaned against the far wall, sharpening her fan's blades with a predatory grin. They were his most trusted allies, but also his trophies, proof of his dominance over those who had once defied him. And yet, even as they plotted the expansion of his empire, Naruto felt a flicker of unease. The world was crumbling beneath his feet, but something lingered in the shadows, an echo of resistance that refused to die. Naruto clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He would crush it. He would burn the world to ashes if he had to. The Demon King's expansion had begun, and nothing would stop him. The air was thick with tension, and the vast hall inside the demon capital's fortress trembled with the footsteps of armored demons patrolling its corridors. Naruto sat upon his throne of obsidian, his crimson eyes piercing through the shadows as reports flooded in from across the continent. The world was his, or so it seemed. Yet, the whispers of rebellion refused to die. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the armrest as Karui knelt before him, her once fiery spirit now tempered into cold devotion. Her darkened form, transformed by his power, radiated malice as she delivered her report. "The coalition moves, my lord," Karui said, her voice steady. "Gaara of the Sand and the Raikage have gathered what remains of their forces. They plan to strike at the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind." Naruto's eyes flickered with amusement. "Gaara," he mused, leaning forward. "He was a monster once, like me. He should know better than to oppose me." Karui bowed her head. "They are desperate, my lord. And desperate men make mistakes." Naruto stood, his presence filling the room like a suffocating fog. "Let them come," he said. "We will crush their hopes and remind the world that resistance is futile." Far from the demon capital, in the rocky expanse of the Wind Country's border, Gaara stood atop a dune, his eyes scanning the horizon. The coalition's forces were ragged and tired, but determination burned in their eyes. At his side, the Raikage stood like an unmovable wall, his muscles tense and his gaze sharp. "We need to move quickly," the Raikage said, his voice a low growl. "If we wait too long, he'll sniff us out." Gaara's sand shifted around him, responding to his unease. "We already have spies in our ranks. If we act recklessly, we risk exposing ourselves before the battle even begins." The Raikage clenched his fists. "Then we root them out now." Before Gaara could respond, an explosion tore through the encampment behind him. Flames licked the sky as screams filled the air. Soldiers scattered, some rushing to extinguish the fires while others searched for the source of the attack. "It's already begun," Gaara said, his voice calm but resolute. "Prepare to fight." In the chaos, Karui moved unseen, her demon form blending into the shadows. She cut down soldiers with practiced efficiency, her blade dripping with dark energy. Around her, other demons disguised as coalition members struck, spreading terror and confusion. Gaara's sand intercepted one of the attackers, crushing its body with brutal force. But even as the creature fell, two more took its place. The Raikage charged through the chaos, his lightning cloak crackling as he tore through the enemy ranks. But for every demon he struck down, more seemed to emerge, as though the shadows themselves were birthing soldiers. "This isn't a battle," the Raikage growled. "It's a slaughter." Gaara gritted his teeth. We need to retreat. But retreat was impossible. The demons had encircled them, herding the coalition forces into a killing zone. Gaara's sand surged, forming walls to protect the survivors, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. Naruto arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in eerie twilight. His presence silenced the chaos, and even the demons bowed as he stepped forward. Gaara's eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Why, Naruto? Gaara asked, his voice strained. Why become this? Naruto's lips curled into a cruel smile. Because the world gave me no other choice. Gaara's sand lunged, but Naruto moved faster. In an instant, he was upon Gaara, his hand wrapping around the Kazekige's throat. You should have joined me, Naruto said, his voice low and menacing. You of all people should have understood. Gaara's sand tried to strike, but Naruto's chakra flared, dissolving it mid-attack. With a flick of his wrist, he threw Gaara to the ground. The Raikage roared, charging at Naruto with a desperate fury. But Naruto barely moved, extending his hand and unleashing a pulse of energy that sent the Raikage flying. You are nothing, Naruto said, his voice echoing across the battlefield. And your defiance ends here. By nightfall, the coalition was shattered. Gaara lay broken but alive, his body dragged before Naruto's throne in chains. The Raikage was less fortunate his body had been left to rot on the battlefield as a warning. Naruto's harem gathered around him, their eyes reflecting his triumph. Hinata stood at his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Sakura knelt at his feet, her head bowed in submission. We will rebuild the world, Naruto said, addressing his followers. And those who refuse to bow will be destroyed. As the night deepened, Naruto's demons marched across the lands, claiming village after village in his name. The world trembled, and the Demon King's empire grew ever larger. The heavens trembled as ancient forces stirred. From the void between realms, the Sage of Six Paths opened his eyes, sensing the dark ripples that distorted the balance of the world. His gaze fell upon Naruto, the self-proclaimed Demon King, whose rise had cast shadows upon the lands and severed the fragile threads of harmony. Naruto stood atop his obsidian throne, overlooking the vast demon capital. The whispers of his loyal servants filled the chamber, but his mind was elsewhere. He felt the presence of something otherworldly. A smirk tugged at his lips. They finally noticed, he said, his voice echoing with amusement. Hinata approached, her transformed eyes glowing faintly. Who, my king? Naruto turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Gods. Or so they call themselves. Outside the capital, the sky cracked open, and beams of light rained down. From them emerged ethereal figures clad in divine armor, their eyes burning with celestial fire. Leading them was the Sage of Six Paths himself, accompanied by warriors forged from light and energy. Naruto Uzumaki, the sage's voice boomed, shaking the earth. You have defiled this world and turned it against itself. Your reign of terror ends now. Naruto stepped forward, his crimson eyes gleaming. You're too late, old man. The world already belongs to me. The first of the celestial warriors charged, their weapons glowing with divine chakra. Naruto didn't flinch. With a wave of his hand, dark tendrils erupted from the ground, ensnaring the attackers and dragging them into the shadows. Screams echoed, but Naruto remained unmoved. The sage raised his staff, and a blinding beam of light surged toward Naruto. He raised his hand, absorbing the attack into his body. For a moment, the light flickered, but then Naruto unleashed it back tenfold, forcing the sage to retreat. You cannot defeat me, Naruto said, his voice resonating with power. I have transcended mortal limits. Even gods will fall before me. The celestial warriors pressed forward, launching coordinated attacks that merged divine elements with ancient techniques. Naruto countered each strike, his adaptability shifting his body and energy to resist their assaults. Tentacles lashed out, shattering their formations, while his demonic chakra corroded their divine essence. Hinata and the other members of his harem joined the fray, wielding powers granted by Naruto. Sakura crushed warriors with monstrous strength, while Karui wielded blades of shadow that cleaved through celestial armor. Together, they overwhelmed the divine forces. The Sage of Six Paths watched in horror as his warriors fell one by one. Desperation flickered in his eyes, but he refused to relent. Channeling his remaining power, he summoned chains of light to bind Naruto. Naruto snarled as the chains tightened, but his body began to shift. Flesh warped, and bones cracked as he transformed into a monstrous form, covered in writhing tendrils and pulsating energy. "You cannot bind me," Naruto roared, shattering the chains with sheer force. The explosion of energy sent the sage tumbling backward. "This is impossible," the sage murmured, staring at Naruto's grotesque form. "It's inevitable," Naruto replied, his voice distorted. "This world belongs to me, and no god can stop what has already begun." Naruto descended upon the sage, their clash echoing through the heavens. The battle raged, but with every strike, the sage weakened, while Naruto grew stronger, feeding off the divine energy. Finally, Naruto seized the sage by the throat, lifting him into the air. "Your time is over." With a surge of power, Naruto consumed the sage's essence, absorbing his strength and leaving nothing but ash. The celestial warriors who remained fell to their knees, their light dimming as their connection to the sage vanished. Naruto turned to his army, his monstrous form reverting as he raised his arms. "The gods have fallen," he declared. "Bow before your king." The demons roared, and the skies darkened as Naruto solidified his dominion. The world trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of his unchallenged power. Naruto stood at the pinnacle of his throne, his crimson eyes surveying the vast expanse of the demon capital. The echoes of his previous battle still lingered in the air, but he felt no satisfaction. Victory was not enough. Power was not enough. He craved permanence, a state beyond the reach of time, death, or defeat. For weeks, Naruto delved into forbidden rituals and ancient texts unearthed from the ruins of conquered nations. Scrolls of eldritch knowledge, whispers of immortality, and cryptic prophecies filled his chambers. He studied, experimented, and consumed the knowledge like a ravenous beast. His hunger grew with each revelation until, at last, he found the answer. The ritual required a sacrifice not of blood, but of will. Naruto summoned his demon generals and revealed his plan. "We will become one," he declared, his voice resonating with undeniable authority. "Your bodies, your souls all will feed my essence. Through you, I will rise beyond mortality." The demons, bound by loyalty and awe, knelt before him, offering their very existence. The harem, now his queens, watched with a mix of reverence and fear. Hinata stepped forward first, her eyes unflinching. "I will always follow you, my king," she said softly, kneeling before him. Naruto placed his hand upon her forehead, and dark energy surged between them. She convulsed but did not resist. One by one, the others followed, merging their beings with Naruto's essence. Their forms dissolved into shadow, absorbed into his flesh until only he remained. Pain racked Naruto's body as his veins turned black, pulsing with demonic energy. His skin cracked and healed in endless cycles, reshaping itself. His consciousness expanded, stretching beyond physical limits. He felt every heartbeat in his kingdom, every whisper of breath. His mind connected with his army, becoming a living network of malice and devotion. When the transformation ended, Naruto rose, his form radiant with malevolent energy. His body shimmered like molten obsidian, veins of crimson light coursing beneath the surface. His eyes had become endless voids, swirling with galaxies of chaotic energy. He tested his new power. With a thought, he disintegrated his own arm. It dissolved into black mist, only to reform moments later, stronger and more refined. He laughed, a low, guttural sound that reverberated through the city. Word of his transformation spread. The remaining nations, desperate and terrified, sent assassins and suicide squads. They died before reaching the gates. Naruto didn't even need to lift a finger, his shadows tore them apart. The heavens themselves seemed to respond. Storms brewed, and earthquakes shook the lands. The remnants of the divine forces made one last attempt to intervene. Celestial warriors descended, their ethereal forms glowing with holy light. But Naruto merely smiled. "You cannot kill what is eternal," he said. The warriors attacked, unleashing divine fury. Naruto let their strikes land, his body disintegrating into dust. But as they celebrated, the dust reformed, and he emerged unscathed. With a flick of his wrist, he turned the celestial beings into pillars of salt, shattering them with a thought. Naruto's queens, now echoes within him, whispered their devotion in his mind. Their combined power fueled him, granting him abilities that surpassed mortal comprehension. He raised entire fortresses from the earth with a glance. He bent rivers and forests to his will, reshaping the world to suit his vision. The people began to worship him. Shrines rose in his honor. Villages surrendered without a fight, offering their daughters and treasures to appease him. The world became his playground, and he reveled in it. But even as he sat upon his throne, surrounded by luxury and adoration, a flicker of unease stirred within him. Immortality had made him untouchable, yet it also left him isolated. He had become something beyond human, beyond demon, beyond comprehension. Hinata's voice echoed in his mind. "You are eternal, my king." Naruto closed his eyes. Eternal. The word both comforted and haunted him. He had achieved his goal, yet a hollow void remained, a void he could never escape. The world lay broken beneath Naruto's dominion, its landscapes reshaped by his will. Mountains had been flattened to make way for sprawling cities of obsidian and crimson, and rivers ran black with corrupted waters. Forests of twisted, thorned trees stretched endlessly, their roots pulsing with dark energy. Towers of jagged stone pierced the skies, casting shadows over the lands below. The world no longer resembled what it once was. It was now a kingdom of demons. Naruto stood atop his grand palace, carved from the very earth and fortified with the bones of those who opposed him. His crimson eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he overlooked the city, a testament to his power and vision. The streets teemed with demons, the humans bound in chains, and creatures that defied nature, all moving in unison under his rule. Within the palace, Naruto's queens surrounded him. Each of them bore marks of their transformation, glowing sigils and enhanced features that reflected their new demonic forms. Hinata sat closest to him, her lavender eyes now tinged with red, exuding both grace and lethality. She had become his most trusted confidant, her once gentle demeanor now tempered with cruelty when required. The queens served as Naruto's advisors, commanders, and lovers. Each one played a role in managing his empire, ensuring his will was carried out without hesitation. Inari, once a kunoichi from the hidden mist, oversaw the military expansion, training armies of demons to enforce Naruto's dominance. Karui, formerly of the hidden cloud, handled diplomatic affairs, coercing nations to surrender peacefully through fear and manipulation. Naruto's lineage became a central focus of his reign. He saw his bloodline as the foundation for an eternal dynasty. Rituals were performed, binding his essence to his queens to produce offspring that inherited both his strength and his immortality. The firstborns emerged as beings of immense power, their bodies resistant to harm and their minds sharp with instinctive cunning. They were raised as future rulers, their education steeped in strategy, combat, and the art of domination. The human population dwindled under Naruto's rule. Those who resisted were either slain or transformed into mindless drones, their bodies reshaped into monstrous forms to serve in his armies. Those who surrendered became slaves, laboring endlessly to expand the demon empire. However, some were spared, offered the chance to prove their worth and rise through the ranks by demonstrating loyalty. These exceptions served as a constant reminder that submission could bring rewards, while rebellion only led to annihilation. Despite the vastness of his empire, Naruto never grew complacent. He spent his nights studying forbidden arts, seeking ways to push his power further. His immortality gave him endless time to experiment, and he used it ruthlessly. New creatures were born from his experiments, beasts with Chi-Di-Noose armor, wings that darkened the skies, and claws that could tear through steel. These monstrosities patrolled the borders, ensuring no one dared challenge his rule. As the years passed, Naruto's influence spread beyond the elemental nations. The world's remaining free territories fell, one after another. Even the oceans were not safe. Fleets of demonic ships sailed across them, capturing islands and crushing resistance. The sky itself bent to his will, as storms of fire and lightning swept across continents, leaving devastation in their wake. Naruto's name became legend, whispered in fear and reverence. Temples dedicated to him rose in every city, where humans and demons alike paid homage. Ritual sacrifices became common, offerings to appease the Demon King and ensure his favor. Yet, amidst the endless conquests and celebrations, Naruto occasionally found himself staring at the horizon. Despite his victories, a flicker of restlessness lingered within him. He had achieved everything he set out to do, yet the hunger for more persisted. His queens noticed this unease but dared not question it, instead offering distractions to keep his mind occupied. One evening, as the blood-red sun dipped below the horizon, Hinata approached Naruto in his chamber. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch both tender and possessive. "You have reshaped the world, my king," she whispered. "But there is still more to discover, other realms, other dimensions. This world is only the beginning." Naruto turned to her, a slow smile spreading across his face. The thought of expanding his dominion beyond this realm ignited a spark within him. He reached out, cupping Hinata's face in his hand. "You're right," he said. "We will not stop here. This world will be the foundation for something far greater." With that decision, Naruto's ambitions reignited. Plans were drawn, rituals prepared, and scouts dispatched to uncover pathways to other dimensions. His empire, already unmatched, was poised to grow even further. As Naruto gazed into the night sky, he saw not an end but a beginning. The world of demons was only the first step in his journey to eternal supremacy. The embers of defiance still flickered across the broken world, though they burned weakly in the shadows of Naruto's dominion. Small groups of resistance fighters, former shinobi and remnants of hidden villages gathered in secrecy, whispering plans of rebellion. Their spirits clung desperately to fading memories of freedom, even as Naruto's empire spread like a consuming fire. Naruto stood atop his throne, his crimson eyes gleaming with disdain as reports of these rebels reached him. He dismissed their actions as the futile struggles of insects, but he did not underestimate them. He understood that even the smallest ember could ignite a wildfire if left unchecked. The Demon King acted swiftly. He dispatched his generals, each infused with his power, to crush the uprisings before they could gain momentum. The demons swept through forests and caverns, unearthing rebel hideouts with ruthless efficiency. Blood stained the earth as entire camps were wiped out, their leaders dragged before Naruto to face judgment. The captured rebels stood in chains, trembling as they knelt before the throne. Naruto's gaze bore into them, stripping away their defiance and leaving only fear. He gave them a choice: submit and serve him, or perish. Most chose submission, their spirits broken by the overwhelming display of power. Those who refused were executed publicly, their screams serving as a warning to others. Among the captured rebels was a woman named Ayame, once a skilled kunoichi of the Hidden Stone. She stood defiantly before Naruto, her eyes burning with hatred. "You may have conquered this world," she spat, "but you will never break our spirits." Naruto approached her, his presence suffocating. He raised a hand, and tendrils of dark energy wrapped around her, lifting her into the air. Pain racked her body, yet she refused to scream. "I don't need to break your spirit," Naruto said, his voice calm yet filled with menace. "I only need to show you how fragile hope truly is." He unleashed his power, reshaping Ayam's body and mind. Her screams finally broke the silence as she transformed into one of his demons, her hatred twisted into unwavering loyalty. When she opened her eyes again, they glowed with the same crimson hue as his own. Word of Ayam's fate spread quickly, crushing the morale of the remaining rebels. Some chose to flee, abandoning their cause, while others surrendered willingly, begging for mercy. Naruto accepted their surrender, weaving them into his ranks and turning their knowledge against their former allies. The battles continued, but each skirmish ended in Naruto's favor. He displayed his adaptability, countering every tactic the rebels attempted. Ambushes failed as his scouts uncovered their plans, and surprise attacks were thwarted by his omnipresent awareness through his demonic network. Despite their losses, a small faction refused to give up. Led by an aging shinobi named Hiroshi, they launched one final assault on Naruto's palace. It was a desperate act, born of hope and despair. Naruto watched from his throne as his armies crushed them. Hiroshi himself managed to reach the gates of the palace, wielding a sealing jutsu meant to imprison Naruto. Naruto allowed him to approach, curious to see the extent of the old man's resolve. As Hiroshi activated the seal, Naruto shattered it with a wave of his hand, sending the shinobi sprawling. "Your time has passed," Naruto said, stepping over the broken men. "You fight for a world that no longer exists." Hiroshi looked up, tears streaming down his face. "And you fight for a world that should never exist." Naruto ended his life swiftly, ensuring there was no lingering resistance. With Hiroshi's death, the last remnants of organized rebellion crumbled. Naruto's victory was absolute. Yet, he did not celebrate. The rebellion had only reaffirmed his belief in the need for control. Chaos could never be allowed to take root again. He called for his queens, instructing them to increase surveillance and fortify their hold over the populace. New laws were enacted, further tightening his grip on the world. Naruto's empire grew stronger, but so did the whispers of unease among his subjects. Even those who had sworn loyalty began to question their choices, fearing what their king might demand next. Still, none dared voice their doubts, for they had seen what happened to those who defied him. As Naruto stood atop his palace, overlooking his kingdom, he felt a strange emptiness. Victory had brought him everything he desired: power, loyalty, and immortality, yet the echoes of rebellion lingered in his mind. It was a reminder that no matter how strong he became, there would always be those who resisted. He vowed to crush any future opposition before it could rise, ensuring his reign would last for eternity. The celebration stretched across the demon capital, a grand festival unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. The streets were adorned with banners of black and crimson, symbols of Naruto's reign fluttering proudly in the wind. Demons and humans alike filled the roads, their eyes filled with awe and fear as they gazed upon the towering palace that symbolized his dominance. Naruto stood atop the balcony, overlooking the masses. His crimson eyes glowed faintly as he raised a hand, silencing the crowd instantly. The air itself seemed to hum with power as he spoke. "Today, we celebrate the dawn of eternal order," he announced, his voice echoing through the city. "This world, once ruled by weakness and chaos, now bows before strength and unity." Cheers erupted, echoing through the streets as the people fell to their knees, worshipping him as their king and god. Within the palace, Naruto's queens gathered around him, each a vision of beauty and power. They stood as his advisors and consorts, their loyalty absolute. They wore elaborate gowns adorned with symbols of their status, their eyes glowing faintly with demonic energy. Hinata, now one of his most trusted queens, knelt beside him. "My lord, the preparations for the next phase are complete." The fusion rituals are ready to begin. Naruto nodded, his gaze shifting to the chamber where the experiments would take place. He had spent years perfecting the art of merging chakra and demonic energy, creating hybrids far superior to ordinary demons or humans. These experiments had yielded warriors of unparalleled strength, his chosen elite. He stepped into the chamber, where several subjects knelt in anticipation. Some were volunteers, eager to rise in rank and power, while others were prisoners offered a chance at redemption through transformation. Naruto's power flared as he began the ritual, weaving chakra and demonic energy together. The room filled with dark light, and the subjects screamed as their bodies began to change. Flesh twisted and bones reformed, their human forms giving way to something monstrous yet beautiful. When the light faded, the transformed warriors knelt before him, their eyes blazing with new power. "You are the vanguard of my empire," Naruto declared. "Go forth and spread my dominion beyond these lands." The experiments didn't stop with warriors. Naruto had begun merging his own essence with his queen's, ensuring that their offspring would inherit his strength and immortality. The children born from these unions were regarded as divine beings, their powers manifesting at an early age. The palace became a place of both reverence and fear. Rituals were held daily, honoring Naruto and his queens, while the people offered tributes to ensure his favor. His offspring were raised as princes and princesses, their abilities honed from birth to serve as leaders and generals. Despite his outward confidence, Naruto's mind never rested. He continued to push the boundaries of his power, experimenting with forbidden techniques to ensure his immortality. He meditated within chambers of pulsating energy, drawing on the life force of his empire to fuel his evolution. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Whispers of dissatisfaction spread among the lower ranks. Some demons, once human, began to question their loyalty as fragments of their old selves resurfaced. Naruto sensed these doubts and acted swiftly, rooting out dissenters and using their essence to strengthen his army. The festivals grew more elaborate, serving as both celebration and intimidation. Naruto would parade his queens and offspring, displaying his dominion for all to see. Dancers moved in hypnotic patterns, and musicians played haunting melodies, creating an atmosphere both enchanting and oppressive. Naruto's queens played their roles perfectly, each embodying a different aspect of his rule's strength, beauty, cunning, and loyalty. They managed the affairs of the empire, enforcing his laws and expanding his influence. Yet even among them, subtle rivalries emerged as they vied for his favor. One night, as the celebrations reached their peak, Naruto stood alone on the balcony, gazing at the endless city below. He had achieved what no one else could, a world united under his rule. Yet, deep within, he felt a flicker of unease. Was this truly enough? He pushed the thought aside, turning back toward the throne room where his queens awaited him. They bowed as he entered, their eyes filled with admiration and hunger. "The world belongs to us," Naruto said, his voice resolute. "And we will ensure it remains ours for all eternity." The queens echoed his words, their voices blending into a chant that resonated through the palace. As the night wore on, Naruto's mind wandered to the future. His experiments had created unstoppable warriors, and his offspring promised a dynasty that could not be challenged. But there were still mysteries beyond this world, dimensions and realms untouched by his power. He vowed to claim them all. The throne room was bathed in a dim, ethereal glow, the flickering light of torches casting long shadows against the intricate carvings adorning the walls. At the center sat Naruto, his presence radiating an overwhelming sense of authority and power. Clad in robes embroidered with black and crimson patterns, his eyes glowed faintly as he gazed down at the assembled figures before him. The air was heavy with reverence. Humans and demons alike bowed before him, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. To them, he was no longer just a king or a conqueror, he was a god. Naruto had transcended mortality, his very essence bound to the fabric of the world he had reshaped. At his feet knelt his queens, each one a symbol of beauty and strength. They wore garments that accentuated their divine status, adorned with jewels and symbols of Naruto's dominion. Hinata sat closest to him, her once gentle demeanor replaced by the cold resolve of a queen. Her pale eyes, still retaining a trace of their original softness, flickered with devotion as she gazed up at him. "My lord," she spoke, her voice smooth yet firm. "The final regions have been secured. Resistance has been eradicated, and the people offer their allegiance willingly." Naruto nodded, his gaze shifting to the grand map etched into the floor. Every corner of the continent bore his mark. The great nations no longer existed as separate entities, they had been absorbed into his empire, reshaped to serve his vision. "And the offspring?" Naruto asked, his voice resonating with the tone of authority that demanded obedience. "They grow stronger with each passing day," answered Ino, another of his queens, who had risen to prominence through her cunning and ambition. "Their abilities surpass even our expectations." Naruto's lips curved into a faint smile. His experiments had yielded results far beyond what he had anticipated. The merging of chakra and demonic energy had birthed a new generation of beings, his children, who embodied the pinnacle of strength and adaptability. They would inherit his legacy and ensure the eternal dominance of his bloodline. As the meeting concluded, Naruto rose from his throne and stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the demon capital. The city sprawled endlessly, a testament to his conquests. Towers of black stone pierced the sky, and rivers of molten energy flowed through the streets, illuminating the night with an otherworldly glow. The people below erupted into cheers as they caught sight of him. They raised banners bearing his sigil and chanted his name, their voices blending into a deafening roar of worship. Naruto raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. He let the moment linger before speaking. "This world has been reborn," he declared, his voice carrying across the city. "No longer will it be ruled by weakness and corruption. We have forged a new order, an eternal realm of strength and unity. And I, Naruto, am its god." The crowd erupted once more, their cheers shaking the very foundation of the city. As the celebration continued, Naruto retreated to his private chambers, where his queens awaited him. They encircled him, their expressions a mixture of admiration and desire. Despite their differing personalities and ambitions, they were united in their devotion to him. He regarded them silently for a moment before speaking. "We have conquered this world, but there are still mysteries beyond it. Realms untouched by our power. Dimensions yet to be claimed." Hinata stepped forward, her eyes gleaming. "And we will conquer them, my lord. Together." Naruto's smile deepened. He reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek as he spoke. "Yes. Together, we will shape the cosmos itself." The night stretched on, and as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Naruto stood at the edge of his balcony once more. The world beneath him was a testament to his strength, ambition, and unyielding will. He closed his eyes, allowing the sounds of the city to wash over him. In that moment, he knew his legacy would endure forever. He had risen from the depths of rejection and despair to become the god of the demon realm, and nothing neither mortal nor divine would ever challenge his dominion again.